Everyone, welcome to Go Beyond Video Courses, Build Your Machine Learning Career. I'm here today with James Van, Director of Career Services at FourthBrain, and I'm Greg Loughnane, Director of Curriculum at FourthBrain. And today we're going to talk to you a little bit casually about what we've seen work for many students, many hundreds of students and learners over the last couple of years throughout our programs. So ideally, you're going to walk away from today with some really actionable steps that you can take to go beyond video courses and really start building your machine learning career. So let's sort of warm things up a little bit with shouting out, where are you tuning in from? You know, I'm Greg Loughnane, and I'm tuning in from Dayton, Ohio. James, where are you tuning in from today?
I'm tuning in from Redwood City, California, right in the heart of Silicon Valley and San Francisco. A lot of action.
Redwood City, the heart of Silicon Valley. Fantastic. Yeah, so we'd love to hear from all of you where you're tuning in from. And also, please, we're going to make this a bit more conversational today. So if you have questions, please post them in the chat and we will get to them often in real time. So let us know if anything we say sparks any ideas or new questions that might come up, and we'll see if we can address those directly. So today's presentation, today's discussion is going to focus around 4 parts. The first part is we're going to talk about the job market and hiring trends today. Obviously, this is a hot button issue, and really any conversation of building a new career in a new field needs to start at the top with the entire market as a whole. James has got some really interesting insights. I'm excited to dig in with him. We're also going to talk a little bit about things that you should not be doing or you should stop doing, and give you some alternatives in terms of ways to really move forward, maybe in a more focused and more productive and more structured manner, both in your job seeking and in your learning. So that's sort of, you know, the core tenets of what we're going to go through today. So first off, you know, James, I was wondering if you could sort of give us some high-level observations of the job market as you see it. I know that you speak to a lot of industry partners all the time, people looking to hire, people looking to work with us in various ways. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing on the regular from them?
Sure thing. First off, yes, to sort of zoom out a little bit and to sort of set the stage and the context around, you know, the AI/ML job market as a whole, right? So I think a lot of us know that, you know, the general trends, we know that jobs in this sphere are increasing dramatically, right? And we also know that by the nature of the work, automation, we're also seeing contraction in some other industries and some other roles. So we're seeing ML roles expand and other roles decrease. And so we're seeing that trend, and it's starting to accelerate with each year as we go on. If you wanted to look more, there's some interesting reports. Forbes has a good report, World Economic Forum. If you just Google those and ML job trends, you'll pull up a report. An interesting one that I saw, some interesting facts that I wanted to highlight. So the World Economic Forum was saying, starting with 2018, jobs were mostly 71% human, 29% machine. By 2025, 48% of those jobs will be done by humans, and 52% of those jobs will be done by machines. So sort of demonstrating that fact of automation. So setting the stage for like, okay, like, you know, where do I sit and how does my life kind of figure into some of those stats? PwC says that by 2030, that ML and AI automation will contribute $15 trillion globally. So we know it's big, and we know it's a thing, and we know it's here to stay. It's not a trend, right? And it's only going to become more important as we go on. Now, that said, obviously over the last few months, we've seen some sort of macroeconomic trends, right? So without getting into the details, we know that there's a certain amount of uncertainty in the job market. Uncertainty in that rising interest rates, inflation, all this stuff that you're hearing on the news. And so companies are unsure of what or how to forecast, kind of uncharted, waters if you kind of look at it historically. So with that comes that, in situations where there is uncertainty, we see a retraction in headcount. What do I mean by that? If I go through, and I'll talk to hiring managers daily, I typically talk to about 10 to 15 hiring managers per week. And I have conversations about like, hey, what are you seeing on the ground? What are you seeing overall? I would say 100% of them are hiring fewer people now than they were just, 3 or 4 months ago. Does it mean that they have stopped hiring? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but the overall number of jobs is increasing. So if they started out with a headcount of 100, maybe they're hiring 40 people now. Again, I'm just kind of, making numbers up, but all of them have been forecasting out or reducing their headcount for finishing up 2022.
Okay, so you're saying that every hiring manager you talk to currently is thinking about how can they reduce headcount heading into 2022. Everybody's really focused on doing as much as they can with the fewest human resources. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And really the conversations come from the C-suite and above, which started as like, hey, so-and-so hiring manager, start to sort of forecast out, like if we had to reduce your budget by 5% or 10% or 15%, what would that look like? And so the hiring managers started to sort of game that out, what I sensed, a few months ago. And we're starting to see that play out now.
Okay, but at the same time, we've got the cost-cutting mindset occurring. We've got this massive growth industry called ML and AI. And, we've heard certainly within the AI fund ecosystem from Andrew Ng directly and from many others that it's still very much worth investing in ML and AI. Is this also what you're hearing from hiring managers?
Yes. I think the overall mood that I get is there's a certain amount of uncertainty, but it's a temporary thing, and that they look to, as soon as there is more certainty, or if they get to a point, I'm actually starting to hear, oh, we're planning on unfreezing some of our open positions, but still less hiring overall in 2022 than we had originally expected.
Okay, perfect. So at the end of the day, what we want you to take away from this little discussion is that although the world is hiring less, there's still a ton of opportunity out there, and it's only going to grow with time. So what you have to do today is you have to stand out more. So Arjun Patel, we are going to absolutely talk about exactly what it is that hiring managers are looking for. And we're going to start very soon. The question is, how can you stand out in a competitive job market? These are all highly competitive jobs. We're talking $120,000, $150,000, $180,000 jobs. How do you achieve one of these in a down economy during a time when people are focused on often cost cutting? Well, it's possible. That's what we want to tell you today. And we see it happen all the time. There are some things that you want to stop doing now if you're doing though. Like, and this is kind of where we go beyond video courses. So if you're still just dabbling in MOOCs to try to fill in every knowledge gap that you have, from basic Python syntax all the way up through self-teach a computer science bachelor's degree, this is the wrong approach, because you're going to get stuck. You've probably gotten stuck in a lot of local minima already, and you're just kind of not able to move forward and get up that next hill. This is the same trap that a lot of people fall into, trying to learn all of the latest and greatest tools on the market. A tool is useful insofar as it's being used in industry and it's going to affect your hiring into the next role you're looking for. Beyond that, there's some basic concepts you need to understand, and those are core, and we want to point you to those. And then on the job seeking side, maybe James, you can talk a little bit about what not to do on the job seeking side.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a little bit more about the actual job descriptions itself. I often, when I'm coaching people, job seekers that are looking to transition or pivot, especially into this field, really take a look at the job description and read it for face value. Read between the lines. What are they asking you to do? Focus a little bit less on like all the details and sort of, see the forest, and in the sense that essentially they are looking for people to come in and do something. So figure out, if it doesn't explicitly say it, like figure it out what it is that they're looking for you to do. Obviously, mindset is a big thing, and we'll talk a little bit more about like what the right mindset might look like. But last but not least, it's not just going to happen. So waiting around for this to happen, I just don't see it happening. Job search is a very intentional and focused effort on your part. So action is a good thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we talk about, try to avoid these things, let's offer some alternatives for everyone here. When we talk about these sort of unstructured dabbling learning, we really want to just align our learning to a very coherent path that takes us from where we are to where we want to be. And so, we're getting a lot of great questions in. So Sumant Belawati asks, could you talk about the different DS roles and briefly discuss their skill sets? For example, ML engineer, data scientist, AI specialist. Sumant, this is a question that we get a lot of times from job seekers, because in order to get that focused, structured learning, you have to define what you're aiming at. And so I would say this is where most of the students that come in and start speaking with us, they struggle quite a bit, is to actually define that job title, define that location sometimes, if they're not remote, define that industry that they're aiming at. And that's really the best way to align your tool sets, your resume, your LinkedIn, get everything coherently aligned towards one goal. So, it's a great question, but it's actually, it's the slightly off target from actually just trying to achieve the job you really want. Many students, and James, I'd love to have you chime in here. Many students, they come and they actually say, I don't care what job title I get, right? What's your best advice for student looking for a job title, trying to pick the right job title?
Yeah, no, thanks. That's a great question. I get it quite a bit. I think that oftentimes student comes to me and we start having a conversation about like what their goals are and where they're going to focus their energy. If someone immediately dives into, specific job titles, I, as a coach, want to kind of like pick at that a little bit and kind of see like what the true motivation is there. Like part of it, I know that it's good to have, like from a branding perspective, some people seek out a specific job title because it looks good on their resume and they're sort of working towards some sort of career progression, which I understand. The challenge is that sometimes, especially in such a rapid paced technology environment that we are all living in, is that not all job descriptions are equal, right? An ML engineer at one company might be different at the next company, and vice versa. A data scientist might actually really incorporate a lot of like ML work. So there is a little bit of fuzziness. So typically what I want to do is drill down into what is it that you really truly want to do? Like what kind of things do you want to work? What kind of things do you want to build on? What kind of an impact do you, as an engineer, want to make, overall? And I think that employers are typically kind of driven by people that want to make some sort of an impact. So job titles are important, but also like at the end of the day, what kind of problems do you want to solve is an important discussion to have as well.
Yeah, that's something that I've heard as well from potential employers, is they really like to have people who go really deep on at least one thing, that sort of impact dimension, something they're very interested in. And then they also want that broad skill set across the entire sort of ML end-to-end ecosystem of tools and technologies. So I think that aligns perfectly with this idea of applying to job descriptions where the thing that you're responsible for doing really interests you. And, one of the other things I just wanted to point out here that I get from students a lot, they say, hey, I applied to all these jobs and nobody responded to me, and I often ask, did you follow up? If it wasn't an automated email, did you follow up directly? Did you follow up once, twice, three times? Because it's very hard to figure out what you're doing wrong if you're not getting any feedback at all. And so you really want to work very, very hard to get that feedback, and you want to keep going even when it feels discouraging. That's the biggest thing, right? It comes back to mindset, as you mentioned earlier, James. So I think we're going to kind of start to really dive in a little bit deeper in this active job seeking section to, Arjun and to Sumant, your questions here. And Pierre, that's a great question about the remote market that we'll also touch on as well. But, James, I want to give this sort of idea slide to you. This is sort of the big idea of when learners come in, they're often aiming at one of three things. Can you tell us about those three things, James?
Yeah, sure thing. As Greg mentioned, hey, student comes in like, hey, what is it that you're looking for at the end of the goal? Like, how will we know that you've been successful, after the program? How do we know like what the focus is essentially? And I've noticed some trends, and here are a few of those trends. We fairly often have people that will come in and say like, hey, I want to work at one of the big tech companies, the FANG companies or MANG companies or whatever acronym you put to it. But essentially the Metas of the world, the Googles of the world, Amazon, right? Companies where they feel like, again, it's sometimes a branding thing, like, hey, this is going to look really good on my resume. And I think that there are some people that are motivated by that. And then I think there are also some people that say that, but aren't really sure like what that means. And so sometimes I'll drill down into that a little bit and say like, well, why? What's going on here? What's your motivation for working at that particular company? I think it's good to really sort of, get a good sense of what your true focus is. I mean, if you really truly believe that that is your path, like, awesome, great, go for it. But some of those FANG companies, in my opinion, are not for everyone. I mean, there's a certain, type of work culture, there's a certain type of work, and a certain type of impact that doesn't necessarily match or map out to all of our students' needs. So I kind of want to know a little bit more about really ultimately what it is that's important to you and what do you want to do, because that will sort of drive that conversation of, truly where does your focus stand. Secondly, we do have a significant number of students that come into our program that what I would consider to be, or what I call, impact driven, meaning that they want to continue to use their superpowers and build their superpowers so that they can go in and affect change, whether it's, they're interested in, working on problems associated with climate change, for example. And they say like, hey, I know that there's a lot of work in the ML space to sort of utilize technology to kind of solve some of the world's problems. You can, pick and choose any type of problem that, is common globally. And there's tech people that are trying to solve those problems. And so we have a large population of those students that come in. And last but not least is probably our biggest bucket of students that come in and they say, look, I'm less concerned about where I do it. I'm more concerned about what it is that I'm doing. I'm really interested, like, hey, I'm doing this right now, but I want to be doing this. I want to work for a company that values AI technology. So in other words, it's the products and the tech and the company itself is being driven by AI. So it's not just an afterthought. They don't have to come in and continue to sell AI. And they say like, I'm going to come in, I'm going to learn, I'm going to contribute, but there's some specific things that I've identified that I want to be doing. And they can literally go through and we start to make a list of the types of things that they want to do. So location, less important, and what they're doing is more important.
Yes. And yeah, I just want to triple click in on this one, because this, I think, is the majority of learners that come in, that they really want a career in machine learning, and they're really open to what that exactly looks like. And in fact, as I've often told many of the students in our cohorts, if you are aiming at social good, if you are aiming at big tech, it actually is a slightly easier step to take to just say, I want to work for an AI first company. I want to work at a true ML AI driven company. And then from there, if you want to keep aiming at a big tech company, you want to keep aiming at a social good and maximize impact in a specific domain, now you've got that job, you've got that stability, you've got that experience that's actively accruing over time that's going to allow you to look so good to these companies that you're just going to be too good to pass up on, and they're going to eventually hire you just the way you imagined. But it's not going to be just the way you imagined. It's going to take just one intermediate step. So we've got, like Pierre asked, and I think you addressed this directly, James, how good is the ML job market for remote abroad jobs? And, again, we go back to this what versus where. And Pierre, I'm not sure if that means that you're abroad or if it means that you're looking for abroad roles. But in either case, what I've noticed, and James definitely comment on this, is that many companies will set a couple of time zones that they're open to, if not broadly all over the globe. Sometimes they like to be at least a little bit synchronous, not completely asynchronous. But I would say that the job market continues to grow, in my view, for everyone I speak to, certainly from the Silicon Valley perspective, that remote first mindset is continuing to take hold. What do you think, James?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I see just a proliferation of remote first jobs. And I think, companies have come to realize that there might be a few outliers, but most companies really can't afford to hire people and force them back into the office. So I think we're going to continue to see remote jobs. With regards to the global environment, I agree with your sentiment of like trying to keep, time zones at least a little bit on track. And I would say also sometimes I've noticed specific to certain industry, banking and fintech tends to be one. Any industry that is heavily regulated, like healthcare tech, for example, is another industry where they might have more constraints on where you work from. So if the data is in the US, they want to keep the data inside the US. And so there are sort of restrictions around regulations that don't allow them to send the data overseas to be manipulated, because that will be, breaking some sort of regulation.
Yeah, I see the same thing in a lot of the government work that I've seen as well. Okay, I've got a couple other questions. I want to address these directly. Arjun, you said a lot of DSML roles have engineering prereqs, which can be hard to get without having prior work experience. Where can we look to learn this stuff on our own? We're going to talk a little bit more about curriculum a little bit later, but realistically, what you want to do is you want to really look at the job descriptions that you're aiming at. And we're going to take a really, really hard look at a MLE job description in just the next slide. So in order to answer the question of what exactly you should learn, you have to really analyze the jobs that you're going after. And that's going to allow you to structure your learning appropriately. So we'll show you exactly what that means in just a second. And then I just want to address FG Fanta's question here, which is, if one comes from software dev in other areas like web or telecommunications, can one really transition right away to an ML related job, given that his or her domain previously was not about data? Is potentially their job that could be a stepping stone? The answer is yes, you can make this transition. But as we're mentioning here, you want to make sure you're transitioning to a place that truly has an AI first mindset. So this idea of I'm doing software, but I'm working at a company that I have to sell ML and AI to the management. This is a very, very common thing we hear from a lot of software engineers. And so what you want to do is you want to actively look for and find jobs that fit your skill set that exists, and also your interest skill set that you want to build up in ML and AI. So with that, let's take a look at a real job description that we pulled this week from the internet. So this
Greg,
is a
this
lot
is
of
my
words.
favorite point right here.
This is the best. Because this is how easy it is. All of you can do this. This is all freely available. And this made me laugh. The first thing that I saw was 7 to 10 years of ML engineering, right? 10 years. So all you need is a decade of ML engineering, and then you can have this role. And all you need is to be an expert software engineer. You need to just know everything about ML ops, and you need to program fluently in 5 different languages, 6 different languages. This obviously is overkill when we look just at the skills that you're needed to succeed on the job. If we look on the right here, so when we actually analyze this job description, again, focus on the job that needs to be done. What are all these really pointing to? They're pointing to the top bullet, which is at the top of the job description, which says, this is what we want from you. If we hire you and you do this thing, we will probably be okay and happy. Can you develop pipelines to deploy ML and AI models? If the answer is yes to the question on the left, don't worry so much about all of the details on the right, because at the end of the day, they're hiring you to do a job, and you need to figure out how to get that job done. That's going to structure your learning and be much more valuable to you than trying to make a checklist of all of these things that each require 3 or 4 different massive open online courses and countless hours of self-study. You're into a solid, 7 to 10 years of work to get this job if you have no experience currently. So don't focus on that, and when you see things that are sort of trying to tell you about tools, try to dig out, what are they saying here exactly? It's like they're saying they want me to be able to stay up on what's happening in this space. Look up Amazon SageMaker. I'm sure you're already familiar with Jupyter Notebooks. Understand how version control is done. And if you can speak to what a tool like Amazon SageMaker is capable of, rather than Amazon SageMaker itself, if you can speak to what Git is used for, rather than Bitbucket or GitHub or whatever it is, GitLab, if you can speak to the core underlying principle, and you can actually build what they need you to build, then what falls out of this is that you actually are left with all of these skills that are not hard skills. Understand business problems, communicate insights, serve as an internal expert, and coach other team members. So a lot of times we focus as technical practitioners on the right when, realistically, we could really streamline our learning by focusing on the left. James, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, this slide is great, and I love it because this is probably, if not the first, complaint that I get from job seekers. It's got to be up there in the top 3, which is like, hey, I'm pivoting into a new career, and there are no quote unquote entry level jobs. I'm just not seeing it here, right? And so right off the bat, what I usually tell people is disregard the number of years of experience that companies are looking for. Focus on what it is that they're asking you to do, and if you can do it, awesome, you're a match. The years of experience are oftentimes arbitrary and tied to things internally that just really don't, frankly, make a whole lot of sense. And study after study within the sort of hiring and HR industry tells us that ideal sweet spot in terms of skill match versus, your resume versus the job description is right around 60 to 70%, right? And if I'm a hiring manager, frankly, I'm not sure that I would want to hire someone with 100% match, because I might question that person's motivation on why they would want to do the exact same thing that they did in their last job, right? So something to sort of remember as you continue to look at job descriptions.
Yeah, I love that reframe, James. 100% is actually questionable. If you have 100% of everything that they're looking for, what is actually wrong with you that you're looking at this job? So remember that 60 to 70%. And disregard the number of years if you focus on the job that needs to be done. Think about how many of these job descriptions are being created. It's copy paste oftentimes from a previous era of software development where AI wasn't really a thing. So we have to move beyond. And a lot of these companies that struggle to hire today are companies that are not AI first companies and are still figuring this out. We've got a question from Razvant Alexandru. What would you consider to be most important as an advantage when talking about landing a job, getting ML related certifications, or having some complex ML side projects? James, I'll let you go ahead and take that one.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Certifications, I think, are proof that you've finished the course. From an employer perspective, I'm not sure how much weight they hold. I think employers are really more focused on, like, are you able to do the job that they are looking to hire you to do? My experience is that certifications don't always prove that. They can sort of build a story and a narrative, which helps get you to that point, but it's certainly not the only thing. My experience also tells me that a lot of employers will take this stance of, like, show me, don't tell me. So in other words, like, learning is great, but you also need to build stuff so that you can say, here's something that I have done, so that they can go and look at it. And then it just makes for a better interview anyway, because then you can sort of do a deep dive on, like, why you did this and what was the outcome, and, like, what you learned from it, which is really where hiring managers really want to be.
Yes. Yeah. And I would say 100% complex side projects beat certifications, 7 days a week. And I think if you go into an interview and they say, what's your experience? And you say, I have this certification, that's not a story, and nobody's going to listen to that. But if you go in and you say, hey, I built this thing, and here was why I thought that it was worthwhile to solve. Here's what I tried to do, which didn't quite work. And then I figured out that I needed to pick up this tool and that tool to actually deploy it properly. And after I got it going, I realized it wasn't quite working for my potential users the way I was hoping it was working. And so I had to iterate on the data in the model. And I was tracking this metric to make sure that I actually improved the performance. And, eventually I wrote up a README file in GitHub, and I made a quick YouTube video of it. If you want more information, you can feel free to check it out. It's linked in my resume. They'll be like, oh, this person is all over it. And I think that's where we see a lot of success happen, even while people are actively doing projects. Remember, you don't have to complete the project to be able to have this discussion and talk about your active challenges. And hiring managers, they like hearing about your active challenges that you're overcoming in real time on your own, as much as they like hearing about ones that you overcame with a group sometime in the past. Okay, so we've got Ed Google Carter says, I have a job and want to become the ML guy and use it to solve problems I already have. So I assume, Ed, that you have a job and you want to become the ML guy there. So how do I fit in here? Ed says. And, Ed, I would say, like, it depends on how ready your company is to really invest in and move towards AI and ML first product development. So you really have to kind of get a feel for, what does the C-level think about this? What does your direct manager think about this? I don't know how big your company is. It's definitely possible. And we've definitely seen people come into our programs and do this kind of thing and create that new role for themselves. But oftentimes it's challenging. James, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, we do see it. More often we see people that are actually just trying to keep current, because not all of our students come in as job seekers. They're actually looking to sort of take their skills back. But I do actually just have a recent grad who was able to successfully navigate in a relatively large organization into an ML team. So she switched from a software engineering role into an ML role. And so it took a little bit of maneuvering for her to sort of identify the correct team, strike up those conversations, and do the internal interview process. And I actually have another student who's in mid-process, who's doing the same thing. Those two particular examples are larger corporations, but there's some things that we can draw from those experiences that'll be relevant to a smaller team, if that's your situation.
Yeah. And I have noticed a number of ML ops grads become sort of thought leaders in their organizations if they're already there, because a lot of people are dying to sort of demystify this idea of ML ops. And if you can come in and you can explain, hey, ML ops isn't that complicated. Here's what end-to-end ML means, boss, coworkers, anybody else in the company, and you can become, look at this job description we have in front of us. It says serve as internal expert, resource, and champion. That's what we're talking about here. If you can do that, that is major value add. I want to sort of refocus here on making sure that we're aiming at the job to be done. And I've got sort of a great question from Sumant, who is saying, hey, I don't want to derail this topic, but what about resume parsing, right? If I ignore the stuff on the right, then it's going to parse my resume and it's going to say, no, he's not a fit and I'm not going to get through. So what do you say to somebody who's worried about resume parsing, James?
There's two things that I would say about this. Number one is, yes, keywords are a thing, especially if you are applying to jobs at companyx.com, because your resume goes into an ATS and then the recruiter on the other end is doing a keyword search in the database, and if the keywords aren't there, your resume never actually gets seen. So people do get jobs that way. I can tell you now that of all the ways to engage employers, it's going to give you the least yield. So in other words, statistically, it's not going to be great. When I was a tech recruiter, I would call between 1% and 5% of the resumes back that I got. So that kind of gives you a sense of your odds, and it might even be less than that if there are a lot of people that are applying for the role. So my whole thing is I would like to sort of circumvent that process to begin with. But that said, with your resume, also with your LinkedIn profile, by the way, too, there is a need to make sure that you are doing a little SEO-izing, if I can use that word, to your marketing materials to make sure that it matches up well with the types of jobs that you're searching for.
Yeah, 100%. And I would just echo that, your LinkedIn profile is huge, and try not to play the game of, I'm submitting this resume into a black hole. Reach out, use LinkedIn actively. This is what we mean about active job seeking. Find the hiring manager who's actually responsible for the job. Reach out to them directly. Ask for informational interviews. Try to be somebody who's memorable and who's coming across as more than just a resume in a pile of resumes. That's how you make yourself stand out in today's job market. So while resume parsing is a thing and SEO-izing is also a thing, it's more important to start playing, get on offense and start playing your game rather than the same game as everybody else, because you're going to have a very, very hard time. 1% is a good number to aim at there, and that's going to be very discouraging. So, one of the things that, as James and I were talking and preparing this, that really struck me that I wanted to make sure we shared with everybody is that while we may have heard of model-centric AI transitioning to data-centric AI, it's interesting to hear the same perspective from hiring managers. So what are hiring managers telling you about the modeling capabilities? And, Greg, we're coming right into the curriculum portion of the talk here. So please hang in with us. But as we transition from model-centric to data-centric AI in the industry, how is this affecting hiring managers and employers, James?
Yeah, so in my conversations, I will point blank ask people just to kind of, keep my pulse my finger on the pulse, so to speak. But and I'll ask them, like, what are your top 3 needs, or what are your pain points? So those types of questions, so I can continue to get an understanding of what they're looking for. I have yet in the last, out of the last couple months, talked to a manager that has modeling in their top 3 needs. And if I sort of like do a double click on that and sort of ask them like what's behind, like, hey, what about modeling? Is that like even a consideration, or like why isn't that part of the conversation? the response is generally one of two things. It's actually usually both. One is, hey, like I've already got a bunch of people that are just like excellent at building models. So like bringing in another like excellent modeler doesn't add value to my existing teams. And so their mindset really is more along the lines of like, who am I going to bring in that's going to complement the skills of the people on my team? So that's number one. Number two is with automation, a lot of places aren't actually building models anymore. They're pulling stuff off the shelf, and they're more concerned about, and this is where their pain points come into play, right? Which is they need people that, yeah, can understand model. It's not that modeling is important. They need people that understand the models, which model to choose, but how to take that model and stitch it into their existing infrastructure, into a large, complex infrastructure that makes sense. That's typically like, a big pain point for hiring managers these days. So a little less focus or less focus on modeling and more focus on the bigger picture of the entire AI product development lifecycle.
Yeah. This really struck me when you said that I already have modeling on my team. I don't need any more data scientists, basically. The science of the data scientists, there's enough there now in 2022, especially in today's job market, in today's economy. They have enough there. They really need to push many, many more models to production so that they start creating a ton of value for their users, for their customers from those models. And that's where you're going to earn the big bucks, is if you can help a company earn directly their big bucks. And so like modeling, although it's important, it's not at all the most important anymore. So when in terms of what we can do right now, there are some things that we talked about. Think like a hiring manager. When we talk about they're building out their team, and whatever pieces they have in place, you're going to have to augment those pieces if you want to fit in to their team. You basically have to become the puzzle piece that slots into their team to make that the attractive hire for them. It's not about forcing the company to fit you. It's about you fitting the company's goals. And the more you understand the mindset of a hiring manager and you understand what their pain points are, the better you're going to be able to align your everything, your LinkedIn, your resume, everything you're putting out there with resonating with that hiring manager. Did I miss anything, James?
No, spot on.
Yeah, fantastic. So keep up with the rapid pace of innovation and make sure that you're intentional in everything that you're doing. If you find yourself studying another course and wondering why, if it's not really going to move the needle, like stop studying it. Realign your plan to one of those job titles that exists now, that was fresh today, that is something that the industry needs. Go ahead and get on LinkedIn and pick one out. If you're interested in startups, get on Angel List. If you're interested in LinkedIn, make sure that you realize like most of that is for bigger companies. Be open to everything. And when we think about evaluation, there is resume parsing in there, but more generally, if you can establish a connection, a communication, you can go and you can get active, you can stand out. This is how you're going to be able to make the biggest impact. And, it all comes back to the soft skills, and it starts inside, right, James? I mean, what do you tell all of the students that come to you about self-awareness?
Yeah, it's a big piece. It's a big piece of the puzzle, which is, like what goes into the process of hiring a new candidate. And self-awareness is a big thing, right? Like we've all been in an interview and they ask you like, hey, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Tell me about a time when, blah, blah, blah. Part of that is really getting to a place where they can make a decision, because the assumption is that past performance will predict future performance. And so that's the theory, whether you subscribe to it or not. The self-awareness thing is tops on my list. At a previous school, we did a survey with Fortune 500 companies, and we asked VP level and up, like, what do you look for? What are the types of qualities that you look for when you hire new employees to your company? And self-awareness was number one. And the intent, or what was behind that, if you sort of drill down into that, they want to know people that know their strengths, know their weaknesses, but also, the idea isn't necessarily to slot you in and continue to have you do what you're really good at and keep you away from what you're not so good at. But those people that are self-aware are the people that typically are striving to get better and continuing to learn and pick up new skill sets and new superpowers. And those are the types of people that employers want to hire. So that's why that's important.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've heard it similarly stated. It's career awareness. It's, do you know where you're headed? If I hire you, do you know the route you want to take through my organization? And that all starts with your initial aim, because your initial aim leads to the next step and the next step. I've talked to hiring managers myself that they actually don't hire people who don't seem to have this career awareness, because they don't want to have that additional task of having to figure out exactly what each next step is for people on their team. They want that growth mindset. And in ML and AI, they need that growth mindset, because they can't keep up with the technical and with everything that's going on as the tools and tech change, like you're going to be able to. And so, like, that is something you absolutely must bring to the table. So remember, stay active in your job seeking. It's not just about modeling anymore. So, okay, what is it about? All right, Greg, we're finally here. What we do is we structure the learning in our programs to align with what industry tells us. So first, I want to zoom in on ML modeling right now. We just basically said, don't worry about modeling. So let's address the elephant in the room. When you look at modeling, and Anataji, you've completed some courses in supervised and unsupervised, but you're struggling to apply this knowledge in projects. What you need to do is you need to kind of, to this buzzword, keeping up with the state of the art thing. What's big now is not supervised and unsupervised learning. What's big now is explainability. If you detect something through an unsupervised learning algorithm, the question is, why did you detect that? And this is where every company wants to make great strides. Nobody wants black boxes to do very, very emotional, tough decision-making tasks, like, for example, diagnosing cancer or no cancer, or diagnosing any disease, or diagnosing defect, no defect on a really high dollar manufacturing line. That's really important to understand how these algorithms are making decisions. And to get really good at explainability, it actually doesn't take a ton of effort, because a lot of times you're just dealing with the same old black box in the neural network, and you're perturbing things on both sides. So you can make some really interesting headway. Anataji, if you look at explainability techniques, and that's where we really focus in our first modeling portion. So you'll see in each step, we're including not just some basic modeling, we're including the tool that you will use today. So AutoML, that should be everyone's new baseline. Explainability should be expected. That should be an expected component of any unsupervised learning. If you use multiple models of different types, experiment and model version control, also called experiment tracking, should be expected. Tools like MLflow, data version control. We've done some recent events with these folks that we encourage you to check out. And then we do have some more sophisticated techniques, especially related to computer vision, in sort of this semi and self-supervised learning space that are pretty interesting, that if you're into computer vision, I would encourage checking out. But, beyond modeling, we kind of have some application space that we all need to understand. We all need to understand how transformers came about, how computer vision led to natural language processing, led to transformers, and now we have commercial off-the-shelf models. So on the applications front, really what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to leverage pre-trained models, fine-tune them so that we can build applications. And, on the data-centric AI side, the question is, well, what do we need to be able to fine-tune those models with? Well, primarily we need to be able to get good data for our application. And so it all starts with defining the business problem, outlining, am I able to get data? Am I able to use something that exists already? You pretty much want to look for things that exist already and that you're able to get data for. And then you go and you start thinking about, okay, how big is this going to be? Do I need any sort of big data tools? Do I need any sort of sophisticated data engineering pipelines? If not, I just need to go quickly down all the way to the ML ops side of the equation here and get a quick deployment up and going. You can do this open source today. You can do this with Hugging Face. We've done an event with Hugging Face recently. I encourage everyone to check out. You can do this on basically every platform for essentially, free for the opening credits that you get when you sign up. And so there's really no excuse not to be aligning your aims to kind of these 4 buckets. James, can you talk a little bit about how you encourage students thinking about these 4 buckets as well?
Yeah, I think these buckets, which appear on our syllabus, they're there for a reason. And they're there because this represents essentially what industry is looking for, right? And so this is kind of battle tested and validated by the people, by our advisors, but also our hiring partners, and also the people that I reach out to and talk to on a daily basis, because it represents, again, that end-to-end piece that hiring managers are looking for. And so it's significant for me because this is almost in essence like a cheat sheet that helps me help students brand themselves out to meet the needs of those hiring managers. So in other words, taking the example from before, if a student comes in and just starts talking about modeling, they're missing the boat. But if they're talking about all these 4 buckets, they're talking about exactly what the hiring managers are needing. And so it helps facilitate those conversations.
Yeah, excellent. And the other way that this was designed was to allow us to really streamline the number of tools that need to be learned. You need to basically get set up so you can develop software. You need to understand some of the quick end-to-end ML ops tool sets that you can apply for free out there. You need to understand sort of how to quickly do experiment tracking, how to quickly deploy computer vision, NLP, transformer models, and how to do that using industry standard web application frameworks, containerization technology, and cloud computing platforms like AWS, Google Cloud Platform, Azure, and the like. And, at the end of the day, my personal recommendation, FourthBrain's recommendations are the same. And these are recommendations that we are constantly talking to industry about. What do you want people to be able to do? And so these are our recommendations to you. This is what the capstone project that we run in our cohorts is designed to force you into. And I know I'm breaking my own rule of no more than 6 bullets on a slide here, but let's go through very slowly. And let's just say, you have to get your software dev environment set up. You have to find a business problem to solve. You have to find a business problem that you can fall in love with, I would actually say. Like, take it to the next level, that you can work on this thing for years. Because in a data-centric world, you have to become an expert at some kind of data. And the only data you're going to care about becoming an expert in is one that's going to help you solve a problem that you're in love with. So start there. If you start there, the rest of the journey is much easier. From there, you need to look at finding a pre-trained model to leverage, to build this solution that you're imagining. This is called AI first product development. Then you need to deploy that first web application. First, do it locally, try to containerize it, then deploy it to the cloud. Find some users. Text your mom, your sister, your brother, text everybody in your family this great new public link you have. Tell them to try out your application. Go get feedback from them. Say, hey, what'd you think? Is there any way I could improve it? I'm trying to build this. And of course, find people that aren't just going to tell you your application is great too. Find people that would actually use it out there in the market, ideally. But you can even get started with family members. Define the metrics that are going to achieve success for you in this product, and then iterate. That iteration is key. And then you have to write the report. And remember, you write the report for you to get your thinking crystal clear, but also for that resume of yours. That GitHub with the README, there's no substitute for that. And there's no substitute for a quick YouTube video with a demo on what you've built and how people can check it out and keep building off of it. If you can go through these steps, and if you can tell this story in an interview, it will not be long before you achieve your goal of becoming a machine learning engineer. So don't worry about being great at everything or having 10 years of ML engineering experience, but do worry about standing out and about aiming at this end-to-end process, certifications or no certifications. Because in order to build and deploy awesome data-centric AI applications, you have to go end-to-end. This is what everyone wants. So remember, if you just continue to dabble in MOOCs, you're going to have a hard time. Work on end-to-end projects. If you're just sending out cold resumes, you're going to have a hard time. Focus on the job to be done. Align your communication and your resume and your LinkedIn and everything with that job. And join a community. It doesn't have to be FourthBrain, but we'd love to have you. Join any community that will give you like-minded people who are aiming in the same direction. Rewatch this webinar if you want to look at exactly what you should be aiming at again, and maybe align some aims with some of the folks that you met in the YouTube chat today. And instead of waiting for a better time, take the step today, because you're not going to be able to stop stepping along this marathon that is a career in ML and AI. It's going to keep moving faster and faster. So hop on the bullet train and get it rolling today. If you're ready today to hop on the bullet train, we do have a program that is specifically designed for you. And it's a 16-week accelerated program. Not everybody is ready for this program today, and we understand that. We want you to take a step from wherever you are. But if you are ready, James and I are here. We're happy to talk to you in more detail about any questions you might have. Live sessions will be Tuesdays and Thursdays. Takes roughly 10 hours a week of your time to do this program. You can obviously spend a lot more time falling down rabbit holes. So some numbers, James, why don't we'll close it out with some numbers here if they're interested in our program outcomes.
Yeah, so just did another sort of update of our reporting. And so if I take the students that are seeking jobs after graduation, the average increase, and again, this is for the United States, average increase in salary for our job seekers is $27,000. The average new U.S. salary, so for their new job, is right around 160K. In terms of our employment metrics, 86% employed within 6 months, 92% employed within 9 months. So yeah,
pretty solid. 160 is no joke. I would love for every single person out there watching to have a job making 160 by the end of the year. And I think, if you align your aims right, it's not outside of the realm of possibility, but it is going to take some hard work, and it's probably going to be very difficult to do alone. So if you're interested in joining the community, our program, we are accepting applications. The deadline is October 1st for the upcoming cohort. And all you need to do is submit the online application, describe a little bit about your background, your interest in ML, and we'll review it and get back to you to see if we need more information to do our best to ensure that you're going to succeed and you're going to get the outcomes that we just showed you. We do recommend that you have some pretty, baseline Python knowledge. If you're going to struggle writing for loops and you're going to struggle with some basic Python syntax, it's probably better for you to practice a little bit more and then come back to be able to really hit the ground running. Comfortability with things like linear algebra is obviously something that's important as we get into machine learning, although we won't dive too deep into the math. Most importantly, a willingness to learn new uncomfortable things and really put yourself out there to meet a lot of great new people is what we look for the most. So that's sort of the program. We also have 3 payment options, just so everybody knows. You can pay up front, you get a small discount. The monthly installment plan, I believe, is 3 months. And then we also have a contingent payment plan where you can pay all of the tuition after the program is complete. And the program is $6,000 US. We are going to be offering a 10% discount for the 10th cohort in the 10th month of 2022. And so for everybody who attended and registered for the event today, if you're interested, you've got that discount in the bag. And one last, first of all, I just want to say, hey, thank you so much, James, for sharing your knowledge with us today about career services, about what you've seen students do to succeed, what works, what doesn't work. I know you've been doing this for a long time, and we live in interesting times. So, thank you for everything that you did for us today. I also want to just mention that we do have an event coming up next week where I will be covering the very basics of getting your software development set up and doing a first deployment using Unix command line, Git, Visual Studio Code, Fast API, Docker, and essentially we're going to be sharing a resource that has for a long time been an internal resource that we've leveraged with students, but we're ready to release it to the world. And so we're going to be doing that in a live deep learning event that I'll be running. And so if you want to kind of really streamline the process of steps 1 through 10 and get through about halfway, we're going to do that in a single hour in one event next week on the 28th. So we will drop the link in the chat if you'd like to register for that event. If you want to check out FourthBrain.ai for more, we've also got an ML Ops program that will be launching another cohort soon, but our next MLE program is October 18th. So that's it for today. Again, thanks, James. It's always great to have you as a co-pilot. We look forward to bringing you more events like this. So please let us know in the chat or through email what you liked, what you didn't like about this event. And, feel free to reach out to me or James directly, Greg at FourthBrain.ai or James at FourthBrain.ai. And don't forget to leave a comment, like, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. So until then, keep learning.